Good morning. I'm Brooks Compton, Mayor of the City of Centerville. We are honored to have you here today in celebration of Veterans Day here at Stubbs Park in the City of Centerville. This is November 11 at 11 o'clock, 2020. At this time, I would like to recognize individuals who are participating in our honor guard who are standing up in the hill behind me. From the Washington Township Fire Department, Lieutenant Jeff Guernsey, firefighter Steve Jensen, and firefighter Ortel. From the City of Centerville Police Department, Sergeant Shaughnessy, who is serving in his 36th, I believe, Veterans Ceremony, and this will be his last as he is retiring. Officer Luafo and Officer Davis. Thank you, officers and firefighters, for participating in our Veterans Day ceremony today. Thank you very much. I'd also at this time like to thank the Centerville Band Ensemble for appearing today. The Centerville Community Band was unable to, but the ensemble came through for us. So Centerville Band, Brass Ensemble, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank several other individuals who had an opportunity to appear today, and I know we limited the number that could attend because of what's going on in the pandemic. But at this time, there are several council members who were able to attend today. Our Deputy Mayor, Joanne Rao, Councilmember Bill Sayre, and I think those were the only two that were able to be here today also with us. Also from city staff, we have our City Manager, Wayne Davis, our Assistant City Manager, Mariah Vogelsgang, our City Planner, Mark Andrick, our Public Works Director, Pat Turnbull, Laura Felicetta, and our Communications Director, Kate Bodsdorf. I'd also like to thank our police department, who has always been very supportive of this event every year. Our Chief, Matt Brown, who's over there, Lieutenant Joe Levine, Lieutenant Wilson, and Lieutenant Yoder. Thank you all for being here. And I also would like to thank our Washington Township trustees and representatives from Washington Township. Dale Berry, trustee. Dale is over there. And also standing next to Scott Paulson. And our fire chief, Scott Kajawa, is here also. And he's back there somewhere, but I know Scott's here. So thank you all very much for participating. And we do have a special guest here today who is responsible for the absolute wonderful reliefs that we have that surround the Veterans Memorial, and that's Virginia Hess. Virginia, appreciate all that you've done to create a great atmosphere here at Stubbs Park. We have our freedoms because of you. 102 years ago, the Congress of the United States passed a resolution in which it first proclaimed November 11, 1918 as Armistice Day. This resolution was passed to mark the end of the most destructive and far-reaching war in human history. World War I would be the war to end all wars. World War I did not end all wars, as was hoped. And what would our grandparents or our great-grandparents who were alive then in 1918 think about where we are today in 2020? So much has changed. Technological advancements have made our everyday life so much easier than it was in 1918. We hold more power and computer power in our pockets today than the computers which sent a spacecraft out of our solar system and took men to the moon. We are able to communicate effortlessly and instantaneously with our friends, kids, and grandkids. Some cars get plugged in at night, and the medical procedures available today were inconceivable even for the most futuristic medical novels authored in 1918 and for decades afterwards. Dictators, brutal and repressive regimes, along with fanatical political systems, have risen with short-lived success in the past 102 years, only to be repelled by the power of the human spirit given to us by God and the veterans we honor today. Since 1918, we have seen our nation in another worldwide war. Many, many conflicts around the globe, massive societal change, historic events, and national tragedies, including the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So much has happened. So much has changed in these past 102 years. But what remains the same is the core of the nation that 102 years ago hoped that World War I would be the war to end all wars. Our nation remains the beacon of freedom seen around the world, bursting with opportunity for those willing to seek it and to work for it. Why has that not changed? It is because of those who we recognize today, our veterans, the millions of you who have put on the uniform of the United States of America in both war and peacetime. You have safeguarded the freedoms which allow us to have these unbelievable opportunities. We have our freedoms because of you. As we look out at the world today, we cannot not ignore that there are still repressive regimes, religious fanatics, and political systems gaining in strength around the globe that wish to harm our nation, our fellow citizens, and the freedoms we cherish, and the veterans who have preserved those freedoms. Our nation can only preserve freedom if we in fact prepare to fight for what our country is and what it stands for, and that those who threaten our freedoms know that we will defend those freedoms. 41 years ago, two young men walked through their military physicals together. They were new best friends that day. One a soon-to-be graduate of law school and the other a newly high school graduate. Both with the same objective, to serve their country in the military, but in far different roles and expected responsibilities. One was accepted in his desired role, the other was not. That young man who I was honored to share that day with 41 years ago went off to serve his country without fanfare or without notoriety. However, he is emblematic of the many other millions of men and women who have given of themselves for their country. His friends, your friends, his neighbors, your neighbors, his community, your community, his nation, and your nation owe him and you a great debt of gratitude. We have our freedoms because of him and you, our veterans. Thank you, veterans, for all you have done for our country. We owe you a great debt of gratitude. Thank you very much. We are fortunate to have with us today Tony Miltenberger from Restoration Church here in Centerville to lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. Most amazing and incredible God, we humbly come before you today giving thanks. Giving thanks that even in the midst of trials and tribulations that have been upon us this year, we pause. We pause to remember the amazing men and women who have sacrificed so much for their communities. Lord, we thank you. We thank you that we live in a space and place in a world where we have the ability to pause, to remember, and to give thanks. So, Lord, today as a community, we praise you. We thank you for all of your creation. And as always, we pray that we live in a world that will one day end in peace. Amen.
Good morning. I want to first thank the communities of Bethany and St. Leonard, not only for being home to so many veterans in Centerville, but for also allowing us to share their stories with you today. This is a tradition we started last year of highlighting certain veterans, and one that we hope to continue for many years. Walter and Ruth, you will hear about today. Unfortunately, they were not able to be here in person because of coronavirus restrictions, but I have been told that they are gathered around the TV right now watching. So Walter and Ruth, thank you for being here. David, you will hear more about you as well soon. But we want to highlight first 97-year-old Walter Pettit, a veteran of the United States Air Force. He spent most of his military career in combat in France and Germany. The first lieutenant flew 43 missions, each lasting about 5 hours, and received 2 Air Medals and 2 Oak Leaf clusters. During World War II, Walter flew the P-47 Thunderbolt, which had 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 500-pound bomb on each wing. During Walter's first combat mission, he flew wingman for a pilot who had flown 1,500 hours in a Spitfire plane in the Royal Canadian Air Force. It was that man's first mission with the United States Air Force. German troops shot down the plane, and the pilot was killed that day. Walter shared that experience has had a lasting impact on his life. After World War II, Walter's fighter group was sailing to Japan to engage in combat. On their 3rd day of travel, the United States dropped the atomic bomb, and the troops' ships were suddenly given the order to change course and head back home instead.
Good morning, everyone. I am Tiara Thornton, your Miss Preteen United States. And I just want to start by thanking you all for showing up today and giving support to our amazing veterans who have given so much for us. And if you guys would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remove your hats.
Detail!
I pledge I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order! On!
Thank you.
Please have a seat. "95-year-old Ruth Snively is what has become known now as a Rosie the Riveter. She worked at the Seaberg factory in Chicago, a company that actually made jukeboxes before the war. During the war, workers made sonar sets for the Navy. Ruth worked on the assembly line, and she soldered electronic parts into the unit. Later, she worked as a civilian employee for the Air Force and repaired aircraft radios. Ruth says a big thrill was to go aboard a B-24 bomber, a B-25 bomber, and a P-38 fighter plane. She later married her husband, Phil, who it turns out had been on a destroyer during World War II, one of the men operating the sonar technology riveters like Ruth made. Thank you, Ruth.
I'd like also to add one additional person to our honor guard today, who's up there on the hill also, and that's Sergeant Anthony Green from the City of Centerville Police Department. Sergeant Green, thank you very much for being here today. We're extremely fortunate to have with us today Colonel Patrick Miller. Colonel Miller, as you all know, is from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He's been here about 5 months now. We are very privileged to have him here today and have him in our Dayton area community. We have such an outstanding relationship with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and all of us who have grown here, grown up around this area, appreciate how important that is, not only to our community and our state, but to our nation. So Colonel Miller, thank you for being here today. Colonel Patrick Miller is the 88th Air Base Wing and Installation Commander at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base here in Ohio. He commands one of the largest air base wings in the Air Force with more than 5,500 Air Force military, civilian, and contract employees. The wing provides support and services to one of the most expansive, diverse, and organizationally complex bases in the Air Force, including a major acquisition center, research and development laboratories, a major command headquarters, an airlift wing, and the world's largest military air museum. The base is home to more than 30,000 employees and is the largest single-site employer in the state of Ohio. Colonel Miller entered the Air Force in December of 1997 as a distinguished graduate of the Reserve Officer Training Corps at Pennsylvania State University. He graduated in 1997 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering, and in 2003, he received a Master of Science in Engineering in Civil Engineering from the Arizona State University. He is also a 2016 Master of Science in National Security Strategy National War College attendee in Fort McNair, Washington, D.C. He has received numerous awards through his service through the Air Force. Legion of Merit with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, a Meritorious Service Medal with 7 Oak Leaf Clusters, a Joint Service Commendation Medal, and an Air Force Commendation Medal with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters. We're extremely fortunate to have with us today Colonel Miller. Thank you, Colonel Miller, for being here to speak to us today as our speaker.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I will tell you, it's the greatest privilege for me to be able to serve the men and women at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We're responsible for a lot of great stuff, but I will also tell you I do nothing, right? I serve at the privilege of extraordinary men and women doing remarkable things each and every day. Mayor Compton, community leaders, friends, family, most importantly, those who have worn the uniform past or present in the service of our nation, welcome. I'm humbled to stand before you today as your featured speaker as we pay tribute to our nation's veterans. Given the dynamic environment we're currently in, we could have easily passed on this event. But we also know that our veterans never passed at an opportunity to serve, just like our community never passes on an opportunity to say thanks. So I truly appreciate you, Mayor, for pressing forward with this event. And I appreciate the folks that are joining us online or watching on television, even though you could not be here. Thanks for your time Thanks for your effort. Thanks for carving out just a little bit to honor our veterans. For those of you that I haven't had the honor of meeting, I'm Colonel Pat Miller, commander of the 88th Air Base Wing and installation commander for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. As the mayor mentioned, I have the distinct privilege to serve over 30,000 men and women that call Wright-Pat home. I took command on 12 June and learned quickly why we're called the Mighty 88th. You truly have a gem in this community. You know, the mayor mentioned it. You often hear Wright-Patterson called the largest single-site employer in the state of Ohio. Here's what I want to tell you. Wright-Pat is here for the defense of our nation. Wright-Pat is here because of this amazing community. So I want to send a huge shout out and thanks to the greater Miami Valley region, to Centerville, to all the surrounding communities for your support, to not just our veterans, but to the men and women that transverse the gates there at Wright-Patterson. Be proud of your installation. You know, no doubt you have other activities pulling at your time, so I appreciate you being here today. I don't plan on speaking long, but I do want to make sure we remember why we're here. On the 11th of November, 1918, World War I was brought to a close as Marshal Ferdinand Foch, who was the supreme commander of the Allied armies, met with Germany's government representative for the signing of an armistice at 11 a.m. Think about that, the symbolism. Where we started today's event, 11 a.m., the 11th month, the 11th day. A year later, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as Armistice Day, commemorating the close of the war to end all wars. Observations over the years have included parades, ceremonies much like this, and the pausing of business for the day at 11 o'clock. All this to honor the veterans of World War I. In 1938, Armistice Day officially was recognized as a federal holiday by Congress. However, it wasn't until the tremendous efforts of our armed forces in World War II and the Korean War that Congress replaced armistice with veterans, amending the original act to commemorate November 11th as a day in America where veterans of all wars were honored. As many of you know, our veterans are a special breed. The brave men and women who serve and protect the United States come from all walks of life. Their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, brothers, sisters, and kids. They're our friends and neighbors, community leaders, co-workers, invaluable members to our society. According to the Census Bureau, less than 7% of Americans, a little over 18 million, are proudly called veterans. Over 41,000 of those veterans live in Montgomery County, and a little over 2,000 call Centerville home. Perhaps more telling of the times, less than 1% of Americans currently serve our nation. Less than 1% don this uniform. That's down 9% from World War II. These brave men and women, our veterans, they serve for a variety of reasons. But regardless of what brought them to the armed forces, each one carried a deep-rooted belief in duty to country and service before self. When you hear the oath of office or study the various services, values, and creeds, you quickly glean what makes these heroes special. Words like duty, honor, courage, commitment, excellence, devotion, guardians of freedom and the American way, defenders of our country, freedom, and democracy. The list goes on and on. To our veterans, these are more than just words. These are the foundational values that drive our service members, whether it's at home or abroad, risking their lives in the defense of our nation to protect our way of life. With over 240 neighbors, friends, colleagues stationed across Wright-Patterson currently deployed today in support of our nation, or those on the front lines defending us, protecting us against the current pandemic, we are constantly reminded of our veterans' courage, commitment, and sacrifice. However, they're not the only ones to sacrifice. Whether deployed or working long hours at home station or downrange, our veterans leave behind families. Husbands and wives, moms and dads, sons and daughters. They create voids in our community. Volunteer firefighters, scout leaders, religious leaders. They miss birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. They lose time and experience that they'll never get back, all in the service of our nation. Our families sacrifice just as much as our service members, perhaps more. I'm joined here by my wife, Beth. You know, in 23 years, we've been together that entire time, 13 different duty assignments, new homes, new friends, new schools for our two boys, Adam and Justin, 12 and 9. Our families go through a lot. They're the greatest deal we have going today. Our nation pays them nothing. They sacrifice everything. They're the pillars at home, sometimes both mom and dad. And during this pandemic, sometimes teacher, caregiver, counselor. They're the shoulder for us to cry on. They're beside us during the celebrations. No doubt, our families are our veterans' heroes. You're my heroes. So a huge thank you to the families of our veterans. Veterans Day is a national recognition of this sacrifice, but many know that this is not the only day we say thanks. We are fortunate to be part of an amazing, amazing community. One where veterans can display their service with pride, hats and pins, t-shirts and vests, and be told thanks every day. A community that proactively hires veterans and offers tokens of appreciation through services and gifts 365 days a year. A community that seeks ways to celebrate sacrifice and honor commitment. Just look around you today. As I mentioned before, Montgomery County has over 41,000 veterans. On behalf of them, thank you to the Greater Miami Valley region for your extraordinary support. Over the course of today, I ask you to spend just a few moments thinking about the veterans in your life. For me, I think about my grandfather, George Klein. Gampy, as we call him, he's a Marine. I made the mistake once to say he was a retired Marine. He boxed me up alongside the ears and says a Marine never retires. He's a Marine, right? And so he's a Marine through and through. He served our nation in the Korean War. He served our nation in the Vietnam War. And you know, despite being in the Air Force, I really didn't appreciate his service until I was in Newport, Rhode Island, and I had the opportunity to go to the Naval War College. And in class, we were studying the Korean War. And I thought, I'll give Gampy a call. And I will tell you, that night was one of the most amazing nights of my life. The battles that we were studying in class came to life in the stories he shared. It was truly, truly a remarkable experience. Today you heard about Walter Pettit and Ruth Snively. In a bit you're going to hear about David Cottrell. Our greatest generation is dwindling. And with them, the harrowing stories of the past are disappearing. I ask you not only to take time to thank a veteran for their service, but ask them about their story. Stop, listen, appreciate. You're surely going to be amazed by the tales they tell. Who knows? You may cross paths with a prisoner of war or a Medal of Honor recipient, and you would have never known. So please, don't let these stories disappear. Don't let our veteran stories go untold. Take a brief moment and spend some time. As I close, I'd like to share one last thought. It may sound a little bit hokey, but for me, each time I hear that national anthem played, a volley of images flash through my mind. Kind of a tribute to our past, where we've been. And then I think about where we're going. I picture, I see Pershing Park and the D.C. War Memorial, kind of tucked off to the side of the National Mall, a tribute to our World War I veterans. I see the National World War II Memorial, smack dab in the center of the National Mall. You hear the water trickling as it goes over those little falls. You see the gold stars representing the heroes who sacrificed their lives in the defense of our nation. You see the tribute to the Atlantic Front, the Pacific Front. It's truly a remarkable sight. Then I see the Korean War Memorial, those soldiers on patrol. It's really special in the winter months when the wind's blowing and you have a full moon, the snow is resting on the statues. That's a solemn sight to see. You can actually picture yourself on that ruck with them. I see the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, taking the long, silent walk from one end to the other, holding hands with my two sons, thinking about the missing, the fallen, those that haven't made it back. And then thinking about then the unwelcomed welcome home that our heroes got. Then I flash forward to scenes from our recent history, your history, my history, our history. And I know that we have come a long way in showing appreciation for our veterans. As General George Washington said in 1789, the willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive veterans of early wars were treated and appreciated by our nation. Thank you for coming out today and showing that appreciation. And thank you for your continued support of our nation's veterans. And most importantly, thank you to our veterans and their families for your service, your sacrifice. I serve today because of you. I serve today for you. I will not let you down. Thank you.
If you have seen the posts on social media, or you saw the article in the Dayton Daily News, or you have been to centervilleohio.gov recently, you have probably seen a photo of Dave Cottrell atop a water buffalo. One of many wonderful photos he sent to us that have been shared in all of those avenues and are available now at centervilleohio.gov right on the home page under News at the bottom. 79-year-old Dave Cottrell served as a chaplain in the United States Air Force all over the country, in Texas, North Carolina, Illinois, and Ohio, and all over the world. Thailand with the water buffaloes, Germany, and Turkey. And he says Turkey was his most memorable assignment. Part of his job was to lead groups of Air Force personnel and their families on trips to places that had been home to early Christian congregations. David said it was thrilling in Ephesus to walk in the ruts made by chariot wheels 2,000 years before. He also explored Cappadocia, where thousands of Christians lived in underground cities during times of persecution. David won the Humanitarian Service Medal, the Defense Service Medal, and many other awards, including those for an outstanding unit, commendation, and meritorious service. Thank you so much, Dave Cottrell, for your service. And thank you as well, Walter, Ruth, and David, all three of them, for not only serving our country, but for letting us share their stories today. Thank you.
Colonel Miller, thank you very much for your presentation today on Veterans Day. For all those veterans, I'd ask if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand indicating you are a veteran so we have an opportunity to thank you with a round of applause for all that you've done for our country. To all the veterans and their families watching on our feeds today, thank you for all you've done for our country. Colonel Miller, we're honored to have you here today and a great presentation. That concludes our ceremony for Veterans Day. Thank you all for attending and watching.